Okay, so let's get started. Thanks everyone for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. So this is a very interesting topic. We have been doing CRs for many years, from 2016, 17, when the regulation came in, and there have been a lot of changes, over the years. We as manufacturer, consultants, and notified bodies, everybody has learned over the years, how we do CRs, everybody kind of improved on whatever they do, from writing the CR, understanding the regulation. So it's been quite a bit of a journey. We, as a company, have done a lot of work in this area. And we thought that some of the work we're doing with our clients is very unique. Some of the content you will see in this webinar is sort of proprietary, originated from us, and some of the best practices we have used in the company. And we thought, let's give something back to the community of CR writers like yourself, to see if you can benefit from this experience. So the reason of choosing this topic um, has been really unique. This has become a challenge for everyone. Obviously, medical device manufacturers, that many times, they have internal discussions, and they have come to a conclusion that they have to go for clinical investigations. And I've seen many cases myself. Some of the companies we consulted, their assessment was not appropriate. Many cases they were not really supposed to do clinical investigation, and with minimal information, not appropriate background of the people on the table who are making decisions, they decided that they need a clinical investigation. And as you know, it is very expensive. It's the most expensive method to do clinical investigations. They had to take some very tough decisions. I've seen many companies get closed. Many product lines got closed because internal folks decided and came to a conclusion that it is not viable for them to continue this product, since they wrongfully decided that they have to go for clinical investigations. But as we went along the journey, there have been a lot of support from MDCGs and the working group related to MDRs, and notified bodies also learned along the way. Keep in mind, it was new for everyone, and initially we had just a handful of notified bodies, and they were very busy. There were times when it's like a 1 year wait time, 6 month wait time, so you don't really know whether you're done right or wrong. So I'm just taking some time why we have chosen this topic. This topic is to help you understand, do you really have to go through this path of clinical investigations, or you can apply, 3 or 4 other methods which are less expensive, easier comparatively, to put your device in the market so that you can achieve your intended goal. So that's the background why we chose this topic. Let's jump on to if you have been listening to our webinars, this is the typical drill. All of you will be unmuted, then there'll be a Q&A session, but you can put questions in the chat box and I'll take them during the end of the session. And we're going to put this video on our YouTube channel as well as on the website. But don't hesitate to reach out to us at contact@saracasolutions.com in case you happen to have any questions when you are watching the replay, or in general, if you happen to go deeper in your project and see the questions. I'm just trying to see where to hide this. Okay, there you go. Okay. Oops, it's came again. Okay, so this is about me. I'm Kuldeep, founder and CEO of Saraca Solutions. I have almost 25 years experience into med device, consolidate a lot of large, big companies, Fortune 500 companies, top 50, and also worked with mid-size, also worked with startup companies. So very good experience, mix from all variety of customers. I was very early on picking up MedDev 2.7 /1 RAV4 in 2016-15 timeframe, whenever it came earlier, and built one of the initial framework to do CRs. I mean, CRs were there previously also in MDD, and we have done in FDA also, but it was not as rigorous as in MDR. But I think the prior experience of doing CRs really helped to understand the regulation really well and come out with a framework which we have expanded and improved over the years. I have good experience on ISO 62304 and various other standards, but it's been really fantastic to help many companies in last many years to launch their products faster so that they can go to revenue generation quickly. Also advise them appropriately based on their notified bodies and what could be the expectation of notified body. Since regulation was fairly new, the expectation of each notified body was different from our experience in the beginning. It's kind of harmonized during the last couple of years, but initially there were a lot of differences. If you write a CR and you go to notified body A, there's a good chance that you might go to next level. If you go to notified body B, there may be questions everybody was kind of getting up to date on the standards, and but I think, as I said, MDCs really helped. So I was fortunate to work with a lot of notified bodies and competent authorities to really understand what was the intent of the regulation and what changes or explanations we were supposed to give to the user so that they can create a viable tech file as well as a CR. So that's about me. Let's jump onto the next slide here. So in this webinar, we'll talk about clinical evaluation. I think all of you know, but it's kind of a quick recap. And what are the typical sources of clinical evidence? What is required in clinical investigation? Then WET. I think all of us are well versed with well-established technologies, equivalent route, which is always the easiest one if you're able to follow. Legal pathways without full clinical investigation. How do you really go step by step to scientifically prove that you need clinical investigation or not? Compliance roadmap and trends. Some of the trends which we have seen in the market, and role of PMCF activity in a post-market clinical follow-up. We were probably the first company, and very early on we built a tool to do post-market clinical follow-up, which has helped our customers greatly to generate data and get their approvals and their decision questions for clinical investigation under MDR. So these are the topics we'll cover. Some of the initial slides, so just a recap, so that all of us are on the same page. and the subsequent slides go more into deep justifying to our topic, do we really need clinical investigation or not? So if you look at clinical evaluation, right, it sort of integrate if you have clinical investigations done on your subject device, scientific literature, which you pull from various websites and the sources, post-market surveillance and post-market clinical follow-up data, vigilance activities you're doing, and the risk management. On the right side, if you look at the wheel, these are the typical 5 things we do. We write CEP first, which is very, very important. Then we identify. Sorry, I'm just trying to move this bar. Oh, there you go. I'm lucky. I got it. Okay. Identify relevant clinical data, appraise the clinical data, analyze clinical data. Each of these steps, when we started initially, if I look at the CRs we did in 2018-19 and CRs we are doing right now, there is a huge difference. There is a huge learning and improvements industry have done. Everybody has kind of evolved, right? And those are some of the best practices what we have used for our clients we are going to share in this webinar. Okay, next. So next, this slide is very interesting. If you look at from the 12 clinical evidences, right? There are 12 we have listed here. This is sort of proprietary based on our experience. We have built this. And many of you have built a little bit different, but this is the method we have utilized. And we have put them into 3 categories, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And if you look at level 1 to 12, level 1 is the best method if you are writing your CER. So if, for example, if you have high quality clinical investigation with no gaps, you will have very less questions on your CR because you have really highly scientific data. If you go all the way down, let's say let's take something on tier 2. Let's say you have evaluation of state of the art. So that's number 6, right? It's good. It really helps to understand how is your device state of the art and the comparison of it from other similar devices available in the market. All the way down, if you go to, let's say, number 10, compliance to non-clinical elements of common specification. So common specification is something which was new in MDR. Number 11 is simulated use animal, cadaveric testing involving ad user. So if you go to the bottoms, there will be more justifications you will have to provide, in your clinical evaluation report. If you look at the 4 columns on the right side, so the first 2 columns talk about legacy. So if you have a legacy product, which is obviously MDD, and then if you look at the bottom row where we're talking about wet and non-wet, so right, well-established technology or not. So I'll take a few examples. For example, if you have a legacy device and your device is well-established technology, in that case, if you have any one of the top 4 or 5, 4, let's say, you will have an easy path to get your compliance done. In case of legacy medical device and that technology is wet, and for some reason you do not have option 1, but you have option 2, then you at least have to have 3 of the tier 2. So if you look at these 12, we divided into 3 tiers, right? So like, for example, tier 2 has almost 5 type of clinical evidence. So if you have 3 of them, there's a good chance that you'll be able to justify and satisfy the needs of notified body. If you look at on the right side, if your device is legacy and it's non well-established technology, then you at least have to have anyone from tier 1, like 1 to 4, you have at least one. Similarly, if your device is non-legacy, so you don't really have too much history with MDD, it's a brand new device, but it's wet, right? You still can justify with tier 1, any level from 1 to 4. But if your device has no history, it's a non-legacy device, and it's non-wet, here is stuck. You have no other choice, but you have to go for clinical investigation. So this chart is very helpful. I would suggest that you go deeper, understand this. If you are using it, in your CERs, well and good, but don't hesitate to adopt this, and this is going to help you as well as the notified body, which is going to review your CERs greatly to see what kind of method you have. This is sort of overview of clinical safety and performance. So you have qualitative and quantitative evaluation. This table has helped us greatly. And to create this table and fill this table is a lot of hard work. But it collates the data at one sheet, gives clear indication to you as well as anybody else, who looks at your CR, notified body or a consultant, or any of your reviewer, right? So on the left side, we have created a column which says availability of any of these preliminary data sources. You have quantitative and qualitative. So subject device clinical data literature, comparison of data sources to SOA, and there are many others, right, in the bottom. Now, if you look at the right side, so you have performance data and the safety data. So you will have to compare both. For example, if you have complaints data, that cannot be used for performance side. That's more safety data. So you need to know which one is what, which one is used for performance, which one could be used for safety data, and you fill this table appropriately based on your internal discussions as a core group of CRs. And if you put this in your CR, it's really helpful for the reviewer to understand holistically how you have analyzed. And many times, we have done many CRs which we have redone because there are fundamental mistakes. When a reviewer sees fundamental mistakes, they go much deeper. So the idea is that you shouldn't be doing any fundamental mistakes or contradicting yourself. One question you said yes, the second you said no, but it's a no-brainer that both have to be yes. Those things need to be taken care. And if you do internal reviews a couple of times, is always really helpful to make sure that there is a consistency in the report. It's a long report, and we have seen some of the reports we have written, which were written by experts of the medical device manufacturer or others, but there were a lot of inconsistency. They divided the work that I'll do the SOA, somebody will do risk and benefit analysis, and when a reader is reading, you can easily identify that this is inconsistent. So this table really helped to make sure that we are aligned. Now, if you look at clinical investigation, this clinical evaluation route, obviously, so the clinical investigation is a clinical evaluation route, one of the route, right, which relies on conducting clinical investigation is generally most expensive, as I talked about earlier, time consuming, It could take months, and it's a high-risk approach, typically required for devices that are new or novel, right? Where sufficient existing clinical evidence is not available, right? So there are, in subsequent slides, we'll talk about various ways where you can get through without doing clinical investigation. But this slides talk about that these 4 or 5 areas, 4 areas which we are listed. If you have any of those, there is a good chance that you will have to go for clinical investigation. So first of them is medical device with no existing clinical data. There's no clinical data available for this medical device. Then you will have to go for clinical investigation. Pre-market device without a legacy version. So I'm a manufacturer. But I do not have legacy. I conceptualized this device, but I'm not able to provide any legacy version. So you have to go for clinical investigation. Novel devices that do not meet definition of WET, right? So in subsequent slides, we'll talk a little bit about WET. But if the device is not WET, then perhaps you might have to go for clinical investigation. Number 4 is new devices under the MDR that cannot claim equivalence due to a lack of access to the technical documentation. So one of the example for this is, you have similar devices, but you cannot claim equivalence because the other manufacturer, you don't really have a legal framework with them. If you have a legal framework, you need to have access to full clinical data and full design and data from that perspective. What is WET? Just very high level. So MDR Article 61, 6B allows certain Class 3 and implantable devices considered WET to be exempt from new clinical investigations. So if you look at these 4, they are relatively simple, common, and stable designs with little evolution, right? A lot of very standard devices, sutures, and many others, right, would qualify in this category. The generic device group are well-known safety. They have not been associated with safety issues in the past. So you have many of these devices are already there in the market for many, many years, and there are no safety issues. We have learned over the years to make design improvements, but there's not much scope to go beyond, right? Third one is well-known clinical performance characteristics, and their generic device group are standard of care devices. There's little evolution in the indications and the state of the art. A long history on the market side. When you have something very long in the market, and you have less complaints or no complaints, there's no adverse events, right? That can consider as a well-established technology. Okay, now let's look at the equivalence route, which people struggle quite a bit initially. Many people struggle now also. They don't really understand. The equivalence route allows a manufacturer to use clinical data from an already marketed device, right? So already marketed device, we are calling it the equivalent device. And keep in mind, equivalent device is different than the similar device, and there's a lot more words, right? But to claim equivalence, you have to understand this slide really well. So you don't really have to go for clinical investigation, right? But you have to make sure that you robustly demonstrate the equivalence, right? So in case of non-class 3 and non-implantable devices, equivalence may be used if clinical evidence is sufficient, right? So we'll talk about what we mean the sufficient clinical evidence. For class 3 and implantable devices, equivalence is allowed only if the device is a modification of a device already marketed by the same manufacturer. But there is a catch here. You cannot go for a major modification in the design. And keep in mind that if you want to claim equivalence, you cannot change the claims, right? You have claims on your device, right? Those should be the same. Within those, if you can make certain modifications in your design, your device can still be considered as equivalent device. The equivalent device is from another manufacturer with contractual access to its full technical documentation. So, I mean, this sentence is the one which created a lot of challenges for many medical device manufacturers because if you look at other markets, for example, US FDA, this requirement is not there. So if you are saying that, the term there is predicates, you can say that, hey, I have a predicate device, and you can refer to a 510(k) number, and it's a lot easier. But here, since the restriction is very big, you have to have a contractual agreement, which is not possible in many ways because these could be competing companies, right? But if you have, many companies have done it, to make sure that they are relevant in the market and they have their business efficacy. But if you want to claim equivalence, you need to demonstrate three things: technical equivalence, biological equivalence, and clinical equivalence, right? And if you have two of them or one of them, it's not going to work. So you have to do an exhaustive, thorough study to make sure that you have all the three agreed or sort of approved to make sure that this is equivalence. If you do not have, then partial equivalence will not work to provide you any kind of relief when you submit your CR or tech file for a notified bodies review. Okay, let's jump on to the next one. So clinical investigation exemption. So this is the main topic for this webinar. So clinical investigation must be performed for implant and class 3 devices except. So there are four exceptions here, right? One is design modifications, and we'll talk about that in one of the subsequent slides. Sufficient clinical evidence. If you have sufficient clinical evidence, you might not have to go for clinical investigation. If you are able to prove that your technology is well-established technology, you can be exempted from clinical investigation. An equivalent device, if you have a formal contract exist with another original manufacturer, and if you have access to all the documentation, you can escape, right? So there are four routes: design modification, sufficient clinical evidence, wet, and equivalent devices. So we'll talk each one of them a little bit more in detail. So the first one is design modification, right? So if you have to really do an assessment of this step by step, the first one is you will have to answer this question: is the device a modification of an existing marketed device, right? So it is, and then again, as I said earlier, modification does not mean that you have changed a major feature or function of the device and you think you will get through it. Chances are very, very less. Make sure that you are not changing any of the claims substantially when you are making modifications. There are very minor modifications which you are doing, some enhancement there, right? That would be allowed. So if you answer is yes for this, then you go to the next one. Is equivalence demonstrated per MDR Annex Section 3 and MDCG, which came later? If answer is yes, then is the clinical data sufficient to demonstrate GSPR compliance? Right? Do you really have sufficient clinical data? If answer is yes, then you are lucky. You don't have to really go for clinical investigation. It's not mandatory. If you can always, it's your preference. If you go, then that's the easiest route. But if you're able to satisfy all these three questions and you have enough data to answer these questions, you don't really have to go for clinical investigation. Good. Let's look at case 2. Now, in case 2, we have sufficient clinical evidence, right? In this case, his device under evaluation is C marked under MDD. Very good. Is a product is specific CS applicable for C marking, right? So as you would have learned, MDR has come out with a lot of common specifications, and these are devices where they are standard devices. They have been there in the market for so long. Suture is one example. There are many others like that, uh, right? So there is enough consensus within clinical fraternity and the medical technology fraternity that, hey, if you kind of fall into this range of specification, right, it's gonna be okay. You can read. I mean, there are many available on the portal of EU MDR. If you are yes, then does the clinical evaluation comply with CS? If answer is yes, is the clinical data sufficient to demonstrate GSPR compliance? And if answer is yes, then you don't really have to go for clinical investigation. So that's the second one. And our experience is that initially many folks really made the mistake. They have had a lot of data, but that obviously that data was not structured, and they were not able to consolidate in time. Getting everybody together in different departments was really hard. But over the years, there are good benefit of this method, and a lot of people are really using it. The next one is wet, right? So you have well-established technologies, for example, sutures, staples, dental fillings, crowns, screws, plates. There are some examples, right? So these are well-established technologies. I mean, there are enhancement here, but they are proven. They have been there in the market for so long, and they have common specifications available. They're generally accepted in the clinical fraternity, right? But you have a sequence here. Is device under evaluation is well-established technology? So if yes, is a product specific CS applicable for CE marking that we have to see in the regulation? If answer is yes, then does the clinical evaluation comply with common specification, right? So you will have to relate what is the requirement of common specifications. Do you have that in your design input, and your design output is ensuring that it meets the requirement of design input? Have you really considered risk associated with all the common specifications as per 14971, the latest standard? If you have done that, the next step is the clinical data sufficient to demonstrate GSPR compliance? And if answer is yes to that, you don't have to go for clinical investigation. Okay, next, the fourth one is equivalence route, which could be hard from the business perspective, because you will have to get an agreement with other manufacturers. So, which typically happen if you have a relationship, it's a subsidiary, or you acquired a company for this purpose or some other purpose, right, where you have the full access to the whole data. So it's not like just design data, but compliance data, vigilance, PMCF, PMS, right? Quality management system could be different for the another entity where you are going through equivalence route. The next one is equivalence demonstrated per MDR section 3 and MDCG guideline. Answer is yes. Then again, the same thing. You will have to ensure that you have enough clinical data to demonstrate GSPR compliance. in this, I think this was something which we did really well as a company initially. So we came out with our own software to do PMCF. And then we were early on to create the PMCF plan template and utilized it extensively for many of our customers. And they were able to get the approval much faster. Initial days now, obviously, as everybody kind of learned, and there's a lot of knowledge sharing around the world in the last 3-4 years. But it's still, the folks who were not traditional medical device companies, they made a lot of mistakes. Some consumer device in MDD or during MDD, it was not really a medical device, but when MDR came, they realized that, hey, this has become a medical device. Now they have to do these kind of things. So it was a learning phase for many of them because they did not really understand the medical device manufacturing regulations, culture, getting adapted to a lot of documentation, doing risk analysis. So we have helped many of such companies to not only get the approval, but also inculcate that culture of high regulatory market, understanding the quality management system, ensuring that there is a documentation, but documentation is of high quality. But this route, is one of the 4 which you can take if you want to avoid clinical investigation. So this is kind of a summary, right? So a common misconception is that the absence of clinical investigation automatically leads to non-compliance, right? In practice, MDR allows alternate clinical evaluation pathways where these are scientifically and regulatory justified, right? So this is a misconception. I have not done clinical investigation. Do I really enter in the market or not? So what we talked about in the previous slides is kind of summary. So if device is a modification, right, as we talked about, already marketed, you can always have a route where you don't have to do clinical investigation. Equivalence can be claimed. That's another one. Notified body agrees with that, with and accepts the equivalence justification. So I think that's another very challenging piece. We found that many of the justifications you provide in your tech file, STED or CR, sometimes it's not appropriate. You're not able to provide enough justification, and there's a lot of back and forth. You lose time and confidence in modified body. So you will have to just do a very good work initially to make sure that your justification of equivalence is really good. That's why you need an expert, not only the subject matter expert of the device category, also somebody who really understand the regulation, who also understand what is being evolving in the market as the expectation of notified bodies. The clinical evaluation of the marketed device is sufficient to demonstrate conformity with the applicable GSPRs, and the CR is MDR compliant. PMCF post-market clinical follow-up studies conducted to continue demonstrating the safety and performance of the device for CE marking. So this misconception can be removed if you really understand the regulation really well and read multiple times. Believe it or not, it's been many, many years. And, when we read it again and again, you learn something new. To our surprise, many of the experts who has been doing this work many times got surprised that, hey, we have read it, but we have not really understood that well. When somebody has read really deep and understanding it much more comprehensively rather than just overlooking some of the things. Okay, now let's compliance roadmap and trends. These are some of the trends which we have seen, and the success rate. I'm talking about the right side of the slide where we have 3 bars. So these are the compliance percentage. This is a kind of a success rate. So if you do the case 2, you get around 75% success rate when you have sufficient clinical evidence. Equivalence route success rate is very less because many times, you are not able to prove that you have adequately done a legal framework with the other manufacturer. And, if you have PMCF data, it's almost 90%. So these are some of the experience we have had and the success rate we want to share with you. Okay, let's move to the next one. The role of PMCF when no clinical investigation is conducted. So PMCF becomes very, very critical in this aspect. So you have to do post-market clinical studies, PMCF surveys and questionnaires, right? So we were one of the first companies to come out with the software with the surveys, which has helped many of our customers, and the questionnaires, right? Designing questionnaires, getting it reviewed really well, making sure that you have appropriate questions is very, very important. Again, here you need subject matter expert about the device, subject device, and also folks who really understand the regulation really well. Registries and observational studies, PMCF should include literature reviews and analysis of real-world evidence and collection of adverse event and performance data, right? So, so PMCF becomes very, very critical. Now, initially, when we did CRs probably 5 years ago, there everybody was sort of learning, so the expectation was not that deep. But right now, everybody expect that each 5 of these bucket content has to be really rich, analyzed, right? Come out with something new where you can explain your thoughts, data more clearly. Right? Use tables, more objective evidences in the writing, not very subjective, so that when somebody else read it, they're able to understand what you want to communicate. This is in questions for clinical investigations, right? So number 1 is the device exempt from clinical investigation under article. If no, then you move. These are like you have to 5 steps, and if you have yes, you can just follow the bottom one. This is which is put together to help you. If, for example, in number 3 is product legacy CE mark device under MDD. If yes, then you follow these 2 options. If product can claim equivalence to similar product in market as per this, then yes, then you follow this. The last one is, kind of, is the product pre-market or without clinical data, non-wet, novel device, then you really have to go for clinical investigations. So I think if you do a real assessment in the beginning, you know that whether you have to go for clinical investigation, because if you spend a lot of time analyzing or misunderstanding, then you are losing a lot of time frame which you could have utilized starting your clinical investigation. Let's move on to the next one. These are like references we have taken. I think all of you know these references. They're available. So a lot of MDCG guidelines, obviously MedDev, and MDR. But we just put it there in case when you watch the replay, you can have more deep dive here. That's good. I think we can just do Q&A. Now I'll see how can I just go to the questions. I see Q&A here. If anybody has any questions. I don't know if we can open the chat audio to allow people to ask questions live. Oh, there you go. So there is a question from Mega. Uh, can we use clinical investigation data from India or India for EU MDR purposes? If yes, which route should be followed and documented? Can we use clinical investigation data from India for EU MDR purposes? If yes, which route should be followed and documented? So she's asking, can we use clinical investigation data from India, like, from other country, not EU MDR? If yes, which route should be followed? I think if you have clinical investigation data and, if your clinical investigation is done as per the international standard, I think it could be utilized for sure. Is it mandatory to mention this route in the CEP-CR under UMDR requirements? Answer is yes. Obviously, you will have to um, mention also what references or guidance document should be included to justify the use of this data. I think you have typical guidances which we talked about in the presentation here. And there could be some guidance specific to a device. You can go through that and kind of look at it. Yeah. So I think the idea here is, if you have done clinical investigation as per the international harmonized standards, I think you can, and if you are able to convince the notified body about this evidence, it could be utilized. See, there's another question from Kit. Can literature data be used instead of conducting a clinical investigation? No. Clinical data, and if clinical data could be utilized, then it's a lot easier. Like, you have four options. When all the four options allowed are exhausted, then you have to go for clinical investigation. And clinical investigation you're doing when you do not really have enough clinical data. You're not able to do PMCF as per the needs. If you with this sequence, if you have decided that you will have to do for clinical investigation, then you will have to use the data which you are generating from clinical investigation, not somebody else's data which is available in the market, or the data you are creating before clinical investigation. I hope that answers your question. I think that's about it. I hope this was helpful for all of you. As I said, we will have this put on our YouTube channel, so feel free to watch the replay. You can reach out to us, contact@saracasolutions.com if you have any questions. We'll be more than happy to help you. We do publish a lot of banners on LinkedIn page about CRs and other things. So if you want to learn, follow that. It'll be helpful for you to be up to date on what is really happening in the market. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate all of you spending time with me here, and wish you all the best. Thank you.